Welcome back to Something You Can Do, a podcast for those hungry for action steps. I'm your host, KJ Kozak. Let's get into it. So, things are a little scary out there, as you may have noticed. And so, I've been thinking a lot about ways that we can use this podcast to help with some of the overwhelm and uncertainty. And this is something you can do. It's concrete, it's action steps. So, how do we take these big, lofty things and turn it into the actionable stuff that we can do from the day to day? Well, I'm really excited in this episode to share an interview with Kelly Clark, the founder of Learning and Creating LLC. She's a resilience and transition coach who empowers individuals, families, and organizations to navigate life's transitions with clarity, confidence, and purpose. And in this interview, she's going to share something you can do that bridges these like day-to-day pieces. What are the actual things that you do in your life that can help provide some of that big picture alignment? And this is going to be the first in a series. Kelly's going to share a few different things that you can do to help honor the seasons of your life and find a little bit of clarity and certainty amidst the chaos. I hope that you enjoy. Today, I'm really excited to be talking to Kelly Clark, the founder of Learning and Creating. Kelly, what is something you can do?
KJ, that's a great question. And I love the premise of what's something you can do. And so the thing that came to mind was honoring the season you're in. Something you can do.
I love that. Uh, in part because of how it really gets at the premise of this podcast of like finding actionable steps to put things into practice while still being kind of a big thing. So, what does that mean to you to honor the season that you're in?
I think to me, it really means looking at the environment that you're in, whether it's personal life, professional life, maybe it's a combination of things, and recognizing sort of the opportunities and the challenges that come with that space that you're in for whatever period of time that is. We often think of seasons, autumn, winter, spring, summer, but it can also be, the back to school season if you have school age kids, or it can be the kids off to college season if you're, at that point. It could be the new job or, a new pet. It can be moving. Lots of things might trigger that kind of season. But I've realized over a period of time that really looking at those parts of life as changing, um, and giving yourself a heavy dose of grace, I think, to understand that there are opportunities and challenges that come along with it. It's just something that it's been kind of on my mind lately.
Mm-hmm. And you've started to kind of get at this question, but why is honoring the season that you're in something that you can do?
Well, I think by recognizing that, our lives are a source of constant change, whether we feel like we're staying in the same spot or whether we are literally moving from place to place, that it is an evolving type of situation. And so things that we maybe hadn't considered before are suddenly in front of us and need consideration. And maybe some things that we had put a lot of time and energy to are no longer taking that time and energy that they had in the past. And I think that sometimes we wind up frustrated, perhaps, or overwhelmed, or we start kind of getting in this feeling of unsettled when we don't realize that some of these things are changing around us, that the season's shifting, and that perhaps it's time for some reflection, time to really give yourself the benefit of taking the time and think, okay, what's going on? What's going on? What is making me physically exhausted? Or why can't I focus on things right now? Or, oh my goodness, I have no time for anything. And really just kind of getting curious about that, I think, too, and understanding that, like, oh, wait, I hadn't noticed that I'd taken on these 3 extra things that I usually am not carrying with me. Or, you know, personally, having been in mom mode for so many years, and then to have both kids off at college, and functioning pretty independently opened up a big new season in my life where I suddenly was like, oh, I have time for this or that, or oh, I can reprioritize. So I think it's just looking at when things are changing that you know are changing, or when you're feeling a little unsettled, like what the heck is going on? Like what I can't get everything done, or I'm feeling out of sorts, the kind of like that funky feeling. There's probably a season that is shifting. And so it's time to kind of take some time to think about it and really look at what's going on.
That is such a useful framework. I mean, obviously, it's making me think of right now. We are recording this in late October, and so season, like in that
Mhm.
more like nature term, obviously, is affecting why I'm so tired. All this happens to me every year, where I'm like, ah, yes, because it's getting dark so early, and all of these other things contributing to this feeling of kind of sleepiness and sluggishness.
Mhm.
So that's the first thing that I obviously think of is that literal season. But I love also that this framework is at so many different levels of like,
Mhm.
there is that literal piece, but then also thinking more about seasons of your life. So, what does this look like? Can you walk us through maybe some steps to honoring the season that you're in?
Absolutely. And I think that part of it is first we have to have the understanding that, as I mentioned before, our lives evolve personally, professionally, with our relationships. So there's always kind of that constant change. And we need to understand we are human. We cannot give 100% to all things all the time. I hate to break it to everybody listening, but that's just
Yep.
the fact of life. Like I've come to that conclusion. We need to accept that. And so if that is indeed the case, then one of the things we can do is sort of, take inventory. Again, I think I can think of multiple times in my life where I have felt just completely overwhelmed, let's say. Like there's not enough hours in the day to do the things I need to do, let alone the things I want to do. Right. But so rather than kind of staying stuck in that like crummy cycle of feeling, the overwhelm, the frustration, I'm not enough, and, all this, stop and take inventory. I love the idea of like writing down the things. For me, that just is very helpful. The physical act of writing it, just jotting it down on a post it note, the back of a receipt, whatever it is, a voice note on your phone. Like take an inventory of like, what are all the things? And taking some time to think about that allows us to sort of put names to it. I'm overwhelmed because I remember a stomach virus sweeping through our home when my children were younger. There was some catching up on all the things following that, right? I was completely overwhelmed at just the vast quantities of laundry that needed to be done. But rather than saying like, oh, I'm so overwhelmed, I'll never catch up, writing that list and taking that inventory. Okay, I need to restock the medicine cabinet. I need to, get all of the linens washed. I need to like writing down the things gave me a tangible list of things that I could do, right? So taking that inventory of like what's really going on. Um, and that can also be the scrolling, if like how long
Mhm.
are you really doing that, right? Like the screen time things on some of our devices can be helpful. But again, like really taking that inventory from a neutral standpoint too, I must say. It's not about judging and being like, oh, I suck as a person that I can't do this, right? But a lot of times we get into these situations where we just feel, like I said, just that kind of, nothing is bringing me joy. I'm not feeling accomplished at things. I'm not feeling like I've got myself together. Whatever that is, take inventory. And once you have a way to see what that is, and there's lots of ways to do that, look at, okay, now that I know sort of what's going on in this season, where my obstacles are, you know, also what those opportunities are, because sometimes it can just simply be that we've overextended ourselves into things. We need to look at ways then that we can adapt, right? We need to try to figure out what things am I going to prioritize and adapt towards that prioritization. And maybe what are some of the things that don't need to be a priority right now and can kind of be scooted to the back burner. Um, I always used to joke, uh, I love my mother, don't get me wrong, but she used to give me grief when the linen closet was not tidy when she visited. And in my mind, I was like, no one's going in there that doesn't already know me. Like your family, if you're going into my linen closet. Um, if like if you can't figure out what towel to use, I don't know how to help you there. Right. I never prioritized that. That was never important to me. Like other
Mhm.
things were more important, right? I mean, and that seems like ridiculous, but if that's what I was concerned with, then okay, then that's what I'm going to spend my time and energy on. But for me, if we had guests coming, the linen closet was not my concern. It was where are we going? What's our itinerary? All those other things, right? But so adapting and understanding whatever time and hours of the day you have, whatever resources you have, looking to make sure that those are maybe aligned to suit where you are and what your capacity is at that time. Um, Kind of the next step I think I look at it as is then you need to communicate those things. From my background in family advocacy, family relationships, communication skills, we also are no one is a mind reader. Well, I would say 99% of the population isn't just going to figure out what you're thinking. So you need to communicate those things to the people who are important, who need to know that. To your spouse or your partner, to your kids, to your workplace, like, hey, I've got a lot going on in this area of my life. And in this season, this is what I'm prioritizing. This is what I need to make a priority for me to be my best self. And I need you to understand, that that's what's happening. Um, so I think, communicating those selves and also, and it sounds silly, communicate it to yourself. Remind yourself in all the ways possible of what it is you've decided to do. For me, I mean, there were times, my little hack is a dry erase marker on the bathroom mirror. Use it like a whiteboard. You can write yourself reminders there, a focus, a post it note on the kitchen cabinet, or, again, whatever it is to help remind you this is the decision I made. This is what I'm choosing to prioritize, or this is what I'm choosing to not. Again, different people motivated in different ways. But communicate that with other people as well, so that you can not have any frictions arise over like, hey, in this season, this is what's important to me, or this is what I need right now. If people generally, if you communicate it, it people can support whatever that is, maybe that's going on. Um, then take action. Stick to what you've decided on. That's what those reminders are helpful, so that you don't say yes to that next committee or that volunteer opportunity or that one more book club or whatever it is, one more commitment that maybe is too much. Um, and then I think just review it. It kind of becomes like a cycle, right? And I think it's helpful too to like set a time frame. A month from now, I'll see where I am. I'll weigh in on sort of how things are changing, how the season is shifting, and what that might look like moving forward. And again, some of these are all really flexible. It's kind of more of a process. Um, some of these things might happen quickly, and others might be saying, this year, because you hear this a lot around like New Year's resolutions and those types of things. Um, if we're not checking in with like, how am I doing, holding myself accountable, um, perhaps the accountability of others. Again, this is very person dependent on, what they're focusing on, what they want to work with. Um, but that's sort of how I approach it as I'm sensing a shift in my life. Whether that's like the full family dynamic, whether that's a professional goal, whether that's a personal, goal or commitments, I can look at the different pieces, and you may be at different spots in the cycle in different parts of our life as well, because we're often not just we're not doing one thing at a time necessarily, but you might be in one season professionally, other things happening personally, other things going on as well. So that's sort of how I've learned to approach it over a number of years and a number of forced seasonal changes in my life.
What a rich and practical framework for making sense of the natural ebbs and flows in life. I mean, one of the things that really stands out to me is this sort of like impermanence or like constant shift and change. And I think about that a lot. And from like a developmental psychology perspective as well, where we are not as humans on this like linear path of growth throughout our lives. And that idea I think can actually be really damaging, especially like, if you have thinking on a smaller-ish scale, if you have a couple of days where you feel really productive and energetic, it can feel very discouraging when you are then feeling really tired and sluggish.
Mhm.
And so I love this idea of seasons as being a way to check in with ourselves in our broader lives and with other people, and thinking about adding that layer of meaning and meaningfulness to the things that we're doing, the goals we have. Um, Even with your example of going through a stomach bug, that is, I never would have thought of that as a
Mhm.
season in that sense, or thinking about it in this framework, to be able to
Right.
think about like, this is a thing that will pass. This is a thing that is just part of my life right now and will phase through. So I'm like really loving this as both, again, the practical, tangible tips for making sense of things, while also kind of connecting back to that broader philosophical meaning making element.
I think too, one of the things that again, this is something I've noticed over time, like you mentioned, like the stomach bug going through the house, that sort of thing. Back to school, right? New job for our family being a military family, moving and that transition, both the leaving transition, the physical move, and then the getting settled again transition, right? You start to notice the more kind of in touch you get with these shifts within your own life, you start to recognize not so much a repetition, it's not the same, but you also start to learn what you need, what supports are best for you, for the people around you, whatever's going on, um, to be able to kind of replicate some of those things and say, hey, you know what? Like, I remember this time. And when this happened, the stomach bug thing, I tell you what, the first time it hit our family when the kids were really little, oh, I was better prepared the next time around, right? I learned my lesson, which is another part of this, right? Learn the lesson. I learned I needed to have Pedialyte and apple juice always in the house, and we just kept it on a rotation. And if no one had been ill, then fine. But it came in handy for me, for a neighbor, for whatever, right? Those kinds of things. So some of it helped for us to be a little bit more proactive in some things. Um, I knew as a former classroom teacher, you should not commit to anything extra in the first 4 weeks of school. Don't do it. Just don't.
Mhm.
Might seem cute, might seem fun. Don't do it. Say no. Because everyone is going to be exhausted. It's all the new things, it's all these shifts, it's the remembering all of the stuff. Cognitively, it's a lot. Physically, it's a lot. Emotionally, it's a lot. It is like, feed your kids when they come in the door, give them food. They're hungry, they're tired, they're emotionally overwhelmed. Um, but I learned that, right? I knew that because I had spent so many years in the classroom. I knew it automatically as my kids became school age. Like, this is just what we need to do. I work with grown adults now, and I still the same thing. Then when the new cycle starts, cut back on all non-essentials and just to focus again. So you learn some of these things, and again, it'll be different for each person, each season, but we can build up some of these skills, and we can take some sort of preventative measures too. And you start to recognize these little shifts, right? It may not be like, as you mentioned, some days of productivity, and then something happens and you get thrown off. And it's not going to take till day 4 or day 5 to like get yourself back to your baseline. You'll recognize and be like, like what's that one little thing I can do to get back toward where I want to be? So that's the other part of it that I think is beneficial, is that we learn a lot about ourselves. And the two of us we may face the same circumstance. We may have similar, resources that we can use, but the supports that we require may be different. And they may shift a little over time, but at least we start to learn, like, I know what I need to be my best. You know, again, within family dynamics and, and spouses and people you share a lot of time and space with, you start to understand what they need in some of these shifts as well, which can be helpful. Again, communicating like, hey, I really, like, I really need to, like, I really need to not talk right now. Or I just, I need to go take myself for a walk. I'll be back in 15 minutes. Just some of these things that we can use to support ourselves too. So I think that's another big benefit of it is being aware, um, and taking that time to kind of inventory, like what's going on, what's really happening, naming it, and then knowing like, what do I need to support myself or others who are a part of this seasonal shift.
Mhm. And in your personal experience and your experience as a transitions focused consultant and educator, how do you help people recognize seasons and those kinds of cyclical struggles versus like getting stuck?
Yeah, I think that's a very common one too, right? We want to jump right to I'm absolutely stuck. Like I have no power in the situation. It's all happening to
Mm,
me. And so I think understanding that these things happen not just when it's challenging, right? I think if we can understand that these seasons, these shifts, these changes can also be emotionally, cognitively, and physically draining, even when they are the most exciting and amazing thing ever. And I don't think that we do a great job of understanding that the body's reacting to the stress and the newness and the whatever. It doesn't necessarily recognize like, oh, this is a really good thing. I'm planning a trip to France. Like this is exciting and wonderful. It's exhausting, right? And so we forget that piece. And so I think that inventory space is really where as a coach and a consultant, I can work with people to say, tell me what's going on, right? Because we say like, oh, I'm so overwhelmed. Okay, so what does that mean? What does it feel like in your body? What's going on in your brain? What's your environment like? And I think that we don't stop long enough because we want to race to like, I need to fix this. I need to get unstuck. But if we don't know what got us there, we maybe won't be as efficient in getting to where we want to go. I mean, I think we'll probably get there, but we may struggle a little bit more. We may take a misstep. We may not, it's like, oh yeah, yeah, I know. I don't need the directions. Hmm, maybe need a roadmap. Maybe do need to follow the navigation system a little bit. So kind of understanding where you are and being okay with being in that uncomfortable spot. You know, I just want to get it done, which is wonderful. But one of the things that I think we can do is do it a little more efficiently. So we're not creating more work or creating more stress or creating more obstacles, and really looking for kind of what's really going on. And I think we also, to that point, we discount the amount of what we're really doing. I I, I think especially as women, especially as caregivers, we forget sometimes what that all looks like, and kind of that the mental load involved in some of that. So I think that really digging into that inventory piece
mhm.
and understanding what types of actions, activities, engagements are like, what kind of resources and energy is that kind of draining from you? And where can you maybe insert some time, some resources, some thought and strategy to leveling that out a little bit more. I mean, I wish we could just say like, well, you have all the time and all the energy in the world, but that's also not real life. So yeah, I think that the inventory part and just really getting kind of down into it, like what's really going on. Um, but I would say with the people that I've worked with, most of the time it's discounting the amount of what they're actually doing, and just because it's become so routine, and being able to kind of peel away a little bit of that is where there's some relief.
It's a very fruitful area to explore. And it's interesting too because I sometimes see the opposite as well where people feel like they are working 14, 16-hour days and they feel like they're just putting everything into whatever project. And then like it's true that they're busy for maybe 12 or 14 hours. But when you actually add up the hours of what's happening, like there's 2 or 3 hours of doom scrolling in there, or 5 of those hours are childcare, which is still work and still counts. But you're not working 12 hours a day if 5 of those hours are picking up your kids and making lunch and things like that. And I think that that's where the taking inventory and being real with yourself about what your obligations are and how you're spending your time is so important for understanding what your real challenges are. If you feel like you're working 14 hours a day and you feel like you're getting burnt out from work, and then you look at it and actually you're spending 6 hours a day on caregiving activities, then the problem might not be work. Maybe work's not what's burning you out.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that it can be, it can be challenging too, because again, I think it's sort of that mix, right? Because we discount some of that as well. That's not real work, but it's still it's commitments, right? It's taking up your time. Looking at things like time blocking, tracking everything you do for a week. Especially if I mean, most of us feel like overwhelm and frustration at not being able to get it all done, right? That's just like the human condition. But really tracking, okay, what are you really doing? And where can you make choices? Where can you create some efficiencies? Where can you make some choices that perhaps would free up more time? Where can you delegate, some things? And not all of these are options for all things all the time, but at least looking at them, if you continue to be like, oh, I'm just so overwhelmed, you'll never get to a better place. Um, you know, a great example that I love to give is like I love cooking. I grew up in a big Italian family. Food, like I love to feed people. I love to feed my family. I love to cook. For me, I find it relaxing. I know a lot of people don't want to come home at the end of the day and cook, but for me, that's like the 30 or 45 minutes. I can put on some music and I can create, right? That's my creative endeavor. For me, it is relaxing. I love cooking. When I was in grad school, my children were in first, second, third grade, 2 kids. So they would like the 2 years I was in grad school, I was working full time teaching. They were in after school activities. I had an active duty spouse who worked long hours, and I had to feed them and bring them to activities and all of that. And, you know, it killed me that I couldn't cook dinner at night. I couldn't cook dinner every night. And 2 nights a week was crock pot meal because I could put it in, it could take care of itself. I could feed the kids as soon as we got home so that I could be ready for class in the evening, all this. I had to give that up, which I know some people would not think
Mm.
is a sacrifice, but I had to give up cooking dinner Monday through Thursday nights so that I could be in class. So my kids to this day, number one, they don't understand how and why I did that when they were little. Mystery to me as well. Um, they're like, that's when we ate all the rotisserie chickens. Yep.
Uh-huh.
Because Wednesday night was rotisserie chicken, fruit cups, and those Hawaiian rolls. That was dinner.
Yep.
Um, you know, and it pained me in some ways that that's what I had to do. But in reality, my family was fed. Everyone we had good meals, and all of that. We would do fast food like once every other week or something, like Chick-fil-A drive-through or whatever, right? Um, and it didn't occur to me until after grad school finished how much I had missed cooking. As something that I enjoyed doing, but like that was my sacrifice. I had to give that up in order to feed them when they needed to be fed and in order to keep us kind of just like all rolling, right? There were some other
Mhm.
considerations that had to be made during those 2 years as well, but that was the one that stood out to me because still to this day, working full time, I still would rather come home at the end of the day and cook dinner or cook parts of dinner. And
Yep.
when weeks are really busy, when I know I can't do that and I have to meal prep everything on a Sunday, I love it on Sunday. But then by the time like Wednesday comes, I don't feel like myself because I haven't spent any fun time in the kitchen. But again, it's the thing I give up. It's the sacrifice that I make to increase efficiency, to be able to know, hey, everybody can grab food when they need it. I can grab food when I get home. Everybody eats. Everybody's got full bellies, and we can continue on. And then when the things slow down again, I can go back to, coming home and fixing dinner because that's the thing that I enjoy doing and helps me to unwind at the end of my day. So that's just like one small, piece. For some people, it might be having a housekeeper come in periods of like, completely, busy times or work schedules. It might, having somebody carpooling kids and sports and whatever, it can be, tag teaming with somebody at work to split up things as they come in because you know that this is a busy time for them and this is a busy time for you. Lots of ways to sort through it. Um, but if you don't inventory and identify where those possible choices could be made, then you'll just keep slogging along and feeling like you're not getting, anywhere. And then you kind of build up some resentment to that season as well, which is not helpful. I mean, it's again human nature, but not helpful. So I think that pausing to take inventory, um, as an individual, and maybe it's also something, maybe it's a partner's thing, maybe it's a family thing, maybe it's a broader team, perhaps, a work team, that things are just like not flowing as well as they used to, or there's maybe a big change that's just happened. Like having this conversation, kind of going through and seeing where the sticking points might be, um, because that's where you can also create the opportunity to make a change or to try something new, right? And that can lead to successful outcomes and people feeling more fulfilled, or whatever it is you're looking for, whatever is missing. I think that that's where you can find the opportunities and come up with some good solutions that can help you in other seasons down the road.
This is so helpful to me, honestly, for thinking about how all of these pieces can come together, like what it would actually look like to figure out what's going on for me and how do I move from here and what do I do with that? And making it relational that can be so empowering, especially when we're thinking about things like, the emotional labor that goes into um trying to be a whole person to, around other people. um, and so one question that I have is, again, drawing on your expertise and experience, what are some ways that you can make this accessible to children in a family? Like, what might that look like to draw them into this process if you're exploring seasons as a family?
So something in our family that really kind of worked well, and as I mentioned earlier, we were a military family. My spouse was on active duty for 27 years, and we moved every 2 years for 25 years. So our kids saw a lot of moves. When they were little, they didn't know any different. But by the time they're like their third move, they were going into preschool, pre-K type age, right? We, in that season of change, they always like, and again, this is for like really little kids, but you can expand it out to, older kids, other adults even. They got to pick the things that were important to them that went in their suitcase because we had to like teach them basically like the movers are going to pack everything. Everything's going in boxes. It's going to go on the big truck, right? We included them in the conversations at a developmentally appropriate level, of course, but explaining like if you want, my older daughter had this little tiger sleep buddy called Speedy, and Speedy slept with her every night.
Hmm.
So explain like, so Speedy needs to go in your bag because your bag is going to come in the car with us. So you'll have Speedy when we go to the hotel and then we go to our new house. Showed them pictures in the new house, those kinds of things, so they would see where we were going. They weren't quite old enough yet to understand like the map, but we like show them all of the things, right? Include anyone who is going to be a part of this change in the conversation, what it's going to look like, so they can kind of mentally prepare too, right? Like the movers are going to come and you're going to do all the movers here, that kind of thing. So kind of long story short, one of the things that we always did for as soon as we had a piece of mail that had our address on it was go to the library and get library cards. Okay. That
Aw.
was our thing. Because when you're moving and all your stuff hasn't shown up yet, the library is a great place to go for, especially a lot of military moves happen during the summer months, and a lot of programs have summer reading programs and different fun things happening or whatever. Science shows and guest musicians, speakers, and all kinds of stuff. And so we would take advantage of all of those things. We would try to find a pool to go swim at, because again, it was summertime. And then we'd find all the cool playgrounds, right? Because these are things that are super important to kids. Also super important to moms who want their children to be tired so they go to bed at night so then you can stay up unpacking. So it was like, okay, so we would do these things, and I tried to make it a little fun for them. And it was a good way to explore a new area, like, oh, this new library. And so we would do all things, but a library card became the thing. We did that when they were like preschool, pre-K. We moved again. Um, they found that we were home. They said they felt like they were home when they had a library card, and they could check out as many books as they wanted and bring them home, and we would do that. So to show that this actually stuck, we did this every single time we moved, to include when they were in high school, 3 times. When our oldest moved into her college apartment that was not a dorm anymore, one of the first things she did was to go get a library card at the public library so she could use the
Aw.
study rooms there and not have to go to campus. And it just really, like, it hit me that, I mean, it's a library card. This is not a big, whatever, but that to her was like that I'm settled here. This is my place. This is where I'm going to be. Um, so again, because it was something we dealt with over and over and over again, we had kind of like these little routines and these little rituals, that were kind of built into it. To find the favorite playground, to find the place that had the best ice cream, whatever it was that they were sort of interested in or kind of was cool at that time. Um, we would try to incorporate into the move so that we could go find those things in a new place so that they could start to see that this is the place we were going to be for at least 2 years. So let's make the most of it. Which then our family sort of developed the motto of maximize opportunities, because of all of that, because it can be really easy too in periods of change and in seasons of swift change, especially, to become very negative and only see the things that are different and not in the good way, or different and not in the way you
Mhm.
wanted. Um, and so it helped us to really look for, like, okay, yes, it's a different place. We've left our friends, and explain to them too my feelings on it. I mean, there were places. It was always leaving the people. The places are places. Some were better than others, but I was sad to leave my friends too. It was okay for them to feel sad. This was a part of the process. But again, that's where that communication piece and explaining to them, how I was feeling as an adult, and then how they were feeling when they were little, and then even as they got older, which sometimes meant allowing them to tell me exactly how they felt, which could be heartbreaking and infuriating in equal measure.
Mhm.
To be really angry that we're leaving one place and they don't want to go to this new place. And then we're at the new place and it's time to leave that new place 2 years later. And they're angry that they're leaving that place,
Yeah.
which, as an adult who had been through it a number of times, I knew was likely to happen, but I couldn't tell them. They needed to experience it, and they needed to be able to communicate that, in their own way. But then looking at the things, what were the opportunities? What were the, not necessarily even positives, but what were the potentials? Because it's not about, you know, making it all cheerful and wonderful and everything, but like, what are the potential good things? What are the potential things that you might get to try? What are the new things we might be able to experience? And there was always something. Again, just that little anchor, right? To begin understanding and kind of creating a new normal around that new environment or that change. So those are big ones for us. I mean, and we still judge a lot of our life by those moves as being seasons, but then understanding even within that, you know, and we were all to your point earlier, as individuals, we were all going through these seasons, but then within a family unit, they
Mhm.
were all going through. And then in some of the places that we were stationed at, a lot of people in a lot of families were going through that same piece, right? So there could be a lot of fluidity, a lot of motion, a lot of emotion too, from a number of different perspectives. So again, recognizing it and kind of staying in touch with um, how it's impacting you, what you're thinking about it, can certainly be, I think, is the key tool. Just that self awareness, and then you can recognize it too in other people when you're like, you know what, like I'm really feeling like this. Maybe they're feeling this way too, or maybe they're feeling a similar type of emotion or having a similar impact on them. So
And that's a great way to build empathy and compassion when you're able to kind of take that perspective and starting with yourself to have compassion for what you're going through and then be able to understand, like, oh, life looks many different ways at many different points to many different people, and to not get prescriptive about, like, oh, well, you should be going through this or you should be feeling that,
mhm.
while also leaving space for those points of connection and for understanding, like, here's how we're all coping with this difficult thing, or here's how we're all celebrating this exciting thing.
Yeah, I'd like to say like, oh, I know exactly what I was doing as a parent and as an educator and as a coach and all these things all these years. But every once in a while, your kids especially, or people that you spend a lot of time around, right? Could be, a best friend, a partner. But for me, especially, it's been my kids a lot of the time. We've spent a lot of quality time together over the years. And to the initial point of the like, oh, I'm overwhelmed. I'm not getting anything done. I suck as a human. I'm so awful at all of this. When we first moved to Pennsylvania, it was wild. We'll just leave it at that. It was absolutely wild. It was the weirdest, probably weirdest of our moves. Long story short, we bought a house, I signed for the house, and it was 3 weeks after moving in before my spouse ever saw the house.
Oof.
So there was a lot going on. I was carrying a very heavy weight. And so it was just my two teens and well, they were middle school. Well, yeah, I guess they were teens, but yeah, middle schoolers, and a big old dog moving in here. And every day was like from 5 a.m. to midnight of the unpacking, the painting, the getting his office space set up. I wanted that to be ready for him when he got here, and all of these things. And on like night number two, I had a not so proud mama moment. And it was just I was exhausted. We had been living out of boxes for 2 weeks on the front side and the move, all of the things. To which then my 12-year-old came in and said, "But mom, you." I was like, I'm not getting enough done. I'm not getting enough done." She said, "But mom, but we've done so much today." And they started rattling off all of the things that we had done that day,
Mhm.
to include like 4 trips to Home Depot, paint samples, ordering a mattress, like taking the dog to the dog park, all of these things. And they said, I think every day, rather than saying what you didn't get done, we really should make a list of all the things we did that day. And they pulled out my phone and started a note of all the things we did. And they said, well, let's see, what did we do yesterday? And they went through all the things. And in my mind, when I looked at the list, I was like, well, it's no wonder I'm exhausted. Like we have been getting stuff done. But again, in that period of like emotional overwhelm, cognitive overwhelm, just physical exhaustion, I didn't see it. I couldn't see it.
Mhm.
And so it took that other, again, it took that outside lens and perspective to be like, hey, hang on a second. Let's make a list. Let's take that inventory. And there was like, I can't tell you how powerful that was. I was still exhausted. I still knew there was a long list of things that I both wanted to and needed to complete in a short period of time. But it did give me that perspective to
Mhm.
understand, like, these two things can be true. There can be a long list of stuff that needs to happen, but I can also see all of the effort and energy that is happening. It wasn't like I was sitting around eating bonbons watching Oprah. Like, it was,
Right.
there was stuff happening, but without inventorying it in again, in that neutral, like removing myself, and inventorying it, which it can be helpful too, to like, when you talk through with other people, all of a sudden you go, well, no wonder once you start to name, the things, again, what those challenges are, or what, again, like, and what those opportunities are too. There can be times where there's a lot of good stuff coming your way, and you have to prioritize or filter, what's happening. Where do I want to focus my energies? That can be just as overwhelming, to try to figure out. And so, yeah, taking that inventory and naming this stuff, putting it in black and white, I think can really give you both the perspective, um, but also a way to kind of see your way forward, as well.
So we have talked through so many different elements of honoring the season that you're in and how to recognize the season and how to kind of move through when things are difficult, when things are going well, how to incorporate other people. I think the last area that I'd love to dive into a little bit deeper is that meaning making component. And like, do you have any thoughts or suggestions about labeling seasons or honoring seasons that are passing, kind of adding on that additional sort of um, deeper, meaningful element to the season beyond just what we get caught up in?
You know, I think so, and I think it's going to sound weird to begin with, but I think having gratitude for your development and your being, like, you as a person, family, a team, whatever that group or individual type of gratitude
Mhm.
is. But I think when we go through periods that challenge us, again, whether it's a period of a couple days that are stressful and kind of a lot, or are wonderful and, travel, or, big celebrations or things, again, I think when we go through a period like that, when we can look at it and think, you know what did I learn about myself, you know and how can I use that to kind of grow forward. Like I mentioned, with like the repetition of seasons and like learning about like what works for you, what works for your family, what works, for your team, your organization. Um, I think looking at it and having some gratitude for the opportunity to grow and understand that growth is such a huge mechanism in what builds us into the people that we are. And I know that, there's a lot of talk out there about, like a gratitude journal, or, I truth be told, I am not a journaler. There we go. I've said it. Um, but but I do think that there is power in kind of taking that moment and understanding, yeah, that was really hard, or that was super challenging, or was very tricky, or was a potentially, like a very emotional, like, time and space, and I navigated it in this way, or I chose to support myself in this way. Um, and so even if that's, I mean, literally, if that's gratitude for yourself, to being like, good job, Kelly, you did not lose your cool, right? Again, it's recognizing what happened, and understanding that impact, right? Because you got to practice that skill. You've got, you learned something, you put it into practice, it now becomes a part of your toolbox. And so I think it's that same thing with the gratitude, right? And again, in our family, we can look back at multiple communities and seasons within those communities, even over the period of my spouse's military service. And so it's easy for me to kind of segment life that way. And there are spaces and places I would not want to return to because they were difficult, because they were, an incredible challenge, because there was maybe some trauma involved in some of the things. Um, but if I look at how did I grow? How did I strengthen myself? What are the positives that came out of it? Very often was understanding that, the capacity that I had as an individual, or that our family had, or that our community had, to get through those pieces. Um, and again, then using that understanding, that growth, that the rich experience, even if it was just crummy, using that experience as a way to say, hey, I did that. We have that strength. I have those skills. I have those strategies at hand, and I can continue to move forward. Um, I think that that's the key. It doesn't turn everything into bright, shiny, rainbows and sunshine and everything. There are still certain parts of it that are, things that can be really, really hard. Um, but I think if we were never challenged in any way to grow or change, like
Mhm.
where would we be, right? I used to say to if people are like, oh, well, if you could go back, I'm like, yeah, if I could go back to 20-year-old Kelly and share with her some of the wisdom and experiences, some hard fought wins that I've had, I don't know that 20-year-old me would understand them, or would make the same
Mhm.
decisions, or would feel the same way about them, because we continue to grow and develop as humans. Um, and so if we can take that lesson learned, if we can be like, oh, I am not going to make that mistake again, like that's incredibly valuable. I'm not going to, I'm going to trust my gut, or I'm going to, say no. Whatever it is, I think if we can look for how did we change, and how did we grow, um, from that, what better understanding do we have of ourselves, of our capacities, of others, and about who we are in the world, I think can be hugely beneficial into making that kind of, meaning, and knowing that it's a part of who we are, um, and letting it know that it's not time wasted. I think that for me is always the big thing. I always come back to, like, efficiencies, right? I'll put in the hard work. We can dredge through the tough seasons, um, if I know that what I'm doing is going to be worth it in some way. On the flip side, that I will have grown stronger, I will have learned something new, I will have improved, something, I will have learned a valuable lesson, which again may not always be the lesson we wanted. Um, but I'm going to come out on the other side better able to grow forward.
Absolutely. So, as we wrap up this conversation, what else would you say to people that are considering honoring the season they're in as something they can do?
I think the best thing, grab a notepad, an index card, or whatever it is, back of an envelope, and just jot down the things that are going on in the season. Take that inventory, um, and give yourself credit where credit is due. Because again, I think when we start to inventory the feelings, the responsibilities, the types of support that we might want or need, or be wishful for, I think if we can take that inventory, decide where maybe we want to prioritize, and probably beyond the inventory piece, communicate it with others who need, and dare I say, deserve to know, in the sense that if your season, your what's going on with you has a possibility to impact, for better or worse, those around you. I think that communication piece too, especially within family or close knit kind of dynamics, again, depending on the workplace, or community, or whatever, can be helpful, because that can also then be a source of support within that season. But I think the inventory part definitely, is the starting point. And then there's a lot of ways to explore from there.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. I really appreciate all of your wisdom and thoughts, and making something that is very sort of up here grounded and accessible.
Well, thanks so much for having me. It was a whole lot of fun to kind of chat through this, and it's a lot of lessons learned over time, but hopefully, folks will find something that's beneficial to them, or at least give them a little perspective on the season that they're in.
Amazing. Kelly, thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
Well, you win a prize for making it all the way to the end of this episode, and the prize is all the juicy, delicious insights you got from that interview. If you enjoyed this podcast, I hope that you will like, share, subscribe, leave us 5 stars. If you didn't enjoy it, there's so many other podcasts that you can probably listen to. You can find us on Instagram at somethingyoucandopod, or send us an email to sycdpodcast@gmail.com. This podcast is something you can do, not things you must or should do. So if it doesn't work for you, that's all right. Tune in next time, and maybe that idea will be something you can do. Have a great day.